Hi, I'm Shira Carpel.
And I'm Shayna Gaunt, and we're board-certified behavior analysts. At How to ABA, we provide practical resources, community, and support to ABA professionals. In each episode of our podcast, we will be having real conversations with real people, sharing real stories about ABA.
We'll share relevant strategies and actionable tips that will make us all better ABA practitioners. It's the ABA content you need that you're not going to learn in a textbook.
For the next few podcasts, we wanted to give you a sneak peek into one of our membership mentorship meetings. During these monthly meetings, we answer questions and discuss relevant issues to today's BCBA.
If you want to be on the next monthly membership call, become a member of the Behavior Resource. So welcome, everyone. So our first question has to do with she's got a 4-year-old learner, and she gives them access to a requested item or activity, and the learner pushes it away. There's a bit more content there that you should know. So she sets up like a first then contingency, like first do this for me, and then you can have the ball, for instance. And the learner does what they're asked to do. And she says, great, nice job. Now you get the ball. And then the learner throws the ball across the room and says, I don't want this anymore. And she does this fairly consistently. Looks like it might be a function of attention or a counter control response of like, I just don't want this. So what do we do? What kind of stuff, possible answers, et cetera?
Mm-hmm. And it looks like what the person said in the question was that they threw the item that they were given as like a reinforcer and kind of made it into this, like they wanted a reaction, or they wanted, the IT or ABA therapist like pretend to cry, those kind of things. So like, what do they do? So what I wanted to address is that I see this pretty commonly where someone will say, I'm really struggling with this learner, where they just seem to be so attention seeking and they just want a reaction from me, and I don't know what to do with them. And so I would say, well, what are their reinforcers? And the person would say, well, they're working for things like balloons and, bubbles and this toy ball. And I'm thinking, well, if they're very attention seeking, then that is their reinforcer. And I think sometimes we forget that we assume that preferences and reinforcers need to be objects. They need to be a toy, or it needs to be, something physical. And we forget all the other functions, right? That's one function, that's access. And so many other things are controlled by things like attention. Escape is a great reinforcer. If you complete this task, maybe you get to leave early. We've used that as a reinforcer. Using all of those different functions as reinforcers is going to be a lot more effective. So if this student said, responded to that first then contingency and completed the first, then maybe what they really wanted was that, that little game where like they pretended that they wanted something and then they threw it and then they get a reaction. And so use that as a reinforcer, like call it something, or call it like the toy throwing game, or the, I pretend to cry game, or whatever that looks like, and put it into a format where they can, kind of work for it. And that could apply to so many different, functions. It could be the escape, attention, whatever it is. Don't get stuck on anything to be an object. So that's what I would say to that. Like, think about other reinforcers that are motivating for this student.
I worked with a speech pathologist one time, and her go-to elevator pitch when people said, what do you do for a living? She said, I play with kids. I play with kids for a living. That's what I do. And I think so quickly we forget that, right? We're always about, well, we use reinforcement, we break down tasks, and we do this, and we do that, and we analyze, and blah, blah. Simply, we should be playing with kids too, right? So it's not about offering them a ball or offering them this, but it's about how do we make this fun for them? And if reinforcement is attention, it's great. Like, I've done lots of stuff with that before. So even like offering them a cookie, and then I pretend to be a cookie monster and I'm modeling that and they're doing that. Obviously with parent permission, because you don't want kids eating cookies like Cookie Monster all the time. But that could be a reinforcer. Or saying, how do I make the bubbles that I'm giving you more fun than just me blowing them and you popping them? So really getting creative. Sometimes it's not even about an object at all. It's just about, me hiding behind a pillow and then going boo, peekaboo, and being really, really fun that way. And that works a lot. And even with kids who people are like, I can't find a reinforcer. What is it? I can't find it. Sometimes sometimes we have to go back to this really basic play. And, I don't want to compare an 8-year-old with no known reinforcers to, a 1.5 or 2-year-old. But at the same time, if you're looking at typical development and you're looking at kids who are, 16, 18 months old, what do they like? They're giggling when you hide behind a pillow and play peekaboo. They're giggling when, you pretend that something is something else. Like, I've got a pencil, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to pretend it's a telephone. All of those things, and trying to be as silly as possible and pushing that envelope may help you with the, instead of that first then contingency, it'll help you with like, oh yeah, it's not really an object that they're working for. It's really kind of me.
Mm-hmm. And this brings us to another question, which I think would be a really good time to address it, because one of the questions was about an RBT who really is amazing and does a great job. But anytime the child is on a break, she's doing like personal stuff. Like the example was that she's knitting or she's doing some stuff that's her own thing. And the person asking the question would really like to see her engaging the client more and was asking for suggestions. And I think this is like a perfect example where we sometimes get a little bit too stuck in this, like first you do something with me and then you go and do your own thing. And those things aren't related. And they really need to be, they really can be. And I think that the optimal way for a child to learn is that those aren't separate things, right? First of all, not all learning has to happen at a table. So that's not just the learning time. And the break time is also super valuable because that's where you tap into so much more of the social reinforcement and all of the stuff that's engaging, that is so that you can create so much more motivation with if you're both engaged. Now, granted, it's very challenging, right? And I think the question was like, does this RBT herself need a break? And that's a valid concern. Give her the breaks. And if she's working for 6 hours straight, that's not realistic. But, maybe schedule your session so that the RBTs don't get burnt out, so that they're not feeling like, oh my God, every time the child leaves the table, I need to recover. So definitely schedule your sessions accordingly so that they do get their breaks. But with the emphasis being that when you're here, it's one session. You're engaged, whether they're sitting at the table, whether they're playing on the floor, whether they're in their reinforcement or they're in a break or they're working. It's all one and the same, because it's not as simple as, first you do this and then you kind of get your toy and do your own thing. It's really not, that's not how we want it to be.
And sometimes just explaining that to the RBT, saying, listen, like, we're trying to teach this kiddo to be social. And if we're teaching him that he's working for, or his reinforcer is to get away from us, what kind of message does that send? Right now, we're assuming that, he is motivated by attention and people and all of that kind of stuff. And we want to play on all his breaks, et cetera. Maybe he truly is working so that he can have a break of his own. And that's totally acceptable as well. But let's, pretend in best case scenario is that, all session long, we want this kid engaged 100% of the time. So, really explaining that to the RBT and saying, listen, working or learning time isn't just at the table, and we're sending this kiddo the wrong message if we're saying, okay, go take your break by yourself, and I'm not going to be a part of it, especially if we're trying to get pro-social behavior happening. Mm-hmm. But Shira touched on a really, really great point, and that's RBT burnout. And this isn't even a question, but I could go down this whole rabbit hole as well. We really do need to look at the RBT schedules, because these guys are frontline workers and they do such amazing jobs. They're they work so well. And, at the end of a shift, I used to be, a therapist as well. And, at the end of a shift, sometimes I'd be sweating based on the learner, right? Like if you've got this young learner and you're lifting them and you're doing this and you're doing that and you're running from here to there, like I used to wear layers so that I could get down to a t-shirt sometimes, because it's tough work, and if an RBT is working for, 6 or 7 or 8 hours, you need to look at what their breaks look like. And, some of the RBTs I work with work in homes. So they do, 3 hours in one home, and then they have to drive, and they're often eating lunch in their cars to get to their next client, to go to that next client. And sometimes they're fighting weather to get there, and it's stressful, et cetera, et cetera. So looking to see whether or not, this RBT, for instance, has other time to knit, right? We look at our learners, and our learners, we always talk about, oh, how do you decrease, negative behavior? We give them a time and a place to do it. Well, we may need to do that with RBTs as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think another big piece is model. Like if they're struggling with it, then you get in there and you model. And sometimes they just don't realize. And if you take, the session and show them what that means to like engage and interact during a break, I think that's very valuable.
That's huge. And if you can't model, considering figuring something else out. And I always joke around about this because, a long time ago, I was taught man training, right? We all know man training, but we're taught man training and using clickers, right? So, okay, I need a clicker for spontaneous mans and I need a clicker for prompted mans. And, another clicker I can, distinguish between unprompted and spontaneous, and a clicker for this. And all of a sudden you've got 6 clickers going, and I jump in there and try and model, and there's no way I can do that. So I don't even require that for my RBTs. So the question or the answer is model, model, model. And if you can't do it, you need to modify your expectations, because if you as a BCBA can't model what's expected, then they can't do it. Like it's just not reasonable to even expect that.
So this was a great question about sensory social routines. So just any ideas for a sensory social routine that's like fun, engaging? We kind of done the typical peekaboo and itsy bitsy spider. This person's question involved there being somewhat of a pushback from the OT about the tickling and, being upside down, and wanted to be respectful of that. But like, what else can we do for an early learner with like limited interests, and how to navigate that?
So my question was, what's the pushback? Like, is it maybe that age is a factor, or is it something else that maybe like the kid shouldn't be upside down or getting that input because they're already, overstimulated that way? I'm not sure what that pushback is. So maybe just politely asking the OT, like, why? Right? Like what's the danger in tickling them, having them upside down, etc. Now,
it could be like the physical intrusion, like it just being intrusive to be touched all the time. But I don't know. Let's find out.
But also age is a factor as well, right? Like I have no problem tickling a 3-year-old, but I'm not tickling a 10-year-old. I used to work with a 10-year-old, and he used to engage in severe negative behavior at school. And his EA would say, "Oh, come here, let me give you a hug to calm you down." And the EA was extremely well endowed. And this person was 10 or 11 going through puberty. And he's like, "This is amazing." So of course his tantrums increased because that's what he wanted, was that hug from his EA. So, if age is a factor, like if this kid you're working with is a bit older, you're right. Or the OT is right. Like we shouldn't be touching them. I would say even by the age of about 7 or so, we start to take a hands-off approach, because it gets a little bit inappropriate after that. But what you can be doing is saying like, what types of things do they like? And maybe this person has a very limited repertoire of things because they're a very early learner. But, maybe we can use some objects, and what can we do to make those objects silly? I've taken things like STEM objects. And what do I mean by a STEM object? Like I go to the dollar store and I get, like spinning things, or I'll get, what else? Those koosh balls, or those little tubes that are filled with water and they've got things in them. Maybe they like those, but it's not really like we talked about before. It's not really just okay, here you go, you play with it, but it's like, whoa, I'm playing with it. Whoa, it popped out of my hand. Oh my goodness, it's behind me. We got to go search for it. That kind of stuff. Sometimes I'll take the ball and stretch it and like tickle them with the balls instead of tickling them with my hands, because maybe it's a touch thing. Making that little object fun. Maybe, I'm famous for putting little things like that down kids' shirts if it's appropriate, obviously. But taking the ball and like, oh, it jumps out of my hand. Oh no, it's jumping. It's got a personality of its own. And then, oh no, it goes down your shirt. And you're like, whoa, I got to find it. And being really super fun with things like that. And sometimes just your reaction to making these toys silly and fun is enough to get kids engaged.
Yeah, like really just be silly, because I could say do a sensory social routine of, the itsy bitsy spider. And if you are blah about it, like it's no longer a sensory social routine. It's just you singing a song and, like be just super boring. But you could take like a piece of paper and create this like, hysterical, interactive sensory social routine where there's that joint attention and the unpredictability and the silliness. And that's really what a sensory social routine is. So it's kind of like, look at what this child is into, and just like create a silly routine around it. It could just be like putting something silly on your head and it like falls off and they giggle and laugh because it's hysterical. Sometimes there's a song where like we bounce on my knee, and it's like, like you just have this really silly ride. Or we do sometimes like open and shut them. But it's less about like the actual song or the game. And it's more about like, it's just being fun and being silly and tapping into like what the child is into, and then creating a routine around that. And there was always, I remember hearing something about start with like, just look at what they're into and add one thing, right? So if they really like to hold the ball and watch it drop, and that's all they want to do is take a ball and watch it drop, ball, watch it drop. So do that, take a ball, watch it drop, and add one thing. So maybe you put it on your head and they watch it drop. So that's so that's now 2 steps. So first we put it on our head and then it drops. And then once they're doing that and you're getting a lot of like sensory social engagement, add something else. Well, maybe we first, hide it somewhere and we have to find it. And then it goes on our head and we watch it drop. So you're kind of like building these routines step by step according to what they're interested in. But you're starting with something that really they chose, that they were into. And then you're just building a routine around that.
Other things I've done, if they are into toys, then, putting cars down a ramp, but like that could be boring. But what if you make really cool sound effects as you're doing it? Beep, 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 woo, like just whatever it is, making those sound effects, if that's what they're into, building towers and knocking them down. And I'm not building, with blocks, I'm not building this massive tower because it takes too long. Maybe I've got the tower built and I put one on it and they knock it down, or maybe I quickly build the tower and knock it down. So, with these early learners, they don't typically like to wait for things. So keep that in mind. So, if you're trying to get, early play, making sure that there's like almost zero wait time before the fun thing happens. And then like Shira said, then you can start adding in one more thing and one more thing to start extending that.
Any other thoughts on that? Or
somebody had a question again, back to an early learner. Oh, Play-Doh is great. Yeah. And not just like, okay, let's make a snake now, but actually like you could pound it out into a pancake and, play peekaboo with the Play-Doh, or you could have your hand or the learner's hand in the Play-Doh and you can't find the hand and you got to, I found it. That kind of stuff as well. A blanket on, using a blanket to slide the learner on the floor. Oh, that's cool. Taking a blanket is awesome, and they could make like hey, sit on the blanket and I'm going to push you around and go back and forth, etc. If you've got 2 people and you've got parent permission, you could take, 2 corners and the other person could take 2 corners. You could make this a swing under the blanket. Some learners, I've used a blanket where some learners really like that deep pressure. So I can roll the child up in a blanket and I call it the hot dog. You can use the blanket as a parachute. So you've got to be under the blanket. You could use it as like peekaboo or hide and seek, bubbles, trampoline, finger play. Gosh, I love these ideas, Monica. That's awesome. Stay tuned for next week's podcast, where we continue to discuss some questions from our monthly mentor meetings. Next week, we'll be talking about tolerates losing, appropriate social skills assessments, and how to collect data in a school system. If you've enjoyed this discussion and want to join us live for future mentorship meetings, become a member of the Behavior Resource at howtoaba.com/join. That's howtoaba.com/join. Thanks for joining today's conversation. Wherever you get your podcast, please go and subscribe, rate, and review so others can find out about us too.
For more from How to ABA, including free resources and ABA materials, visit our blog at howtoaba.com. And make sure that you're following us on social media for more practical tips and updates.